They thought he was just an old veteran, but when he pulled out his Special Forces ID, the entire bar went silent. The Rusty Mug, a venerable institution of clinking glasses and boisterous laughter, usually hummed with a predictable rhythm, a comforting cacophony that had defined its very essence for decades. Tonight, however, the familiar symphony seemed to falter, a discordant note slicing through the usual melody as a profound, almost unnatural stillness descended upon the bustling bar. Silas Thorne, a man whose 72 years were etched into his carefully disheveled appearance, presented himself as the epitome of a frail, forgotten veteran. Yet, behind the meticulously cultivated weariness in his eyes, a glint of steel, sharp and unwavering, lay hidden, noticed by only the most astute of observers. He had just uttered a phrase that, in any other context, would have been swallowed by the general din, but now, it hung in the suddenly quiet air, strangely resonant, imbued with an unexpected gravitas. "The game, young sirs," he stated, his voice a low rumble, intentionally laced with a touch of gravel, carrying just enough authority to pierce the residual hum of the room, "is quite over." Brock Sterling, his face initially a mask of incredulous amusement, let out a scoff that was meant to be dismissive, a casual rejection of the old man's absurd pronouncement. But as Silas's words settled, a nascent tremor of uncertainty subtly rippled beneath Brock's bravado. Beside him, Vance, ever Brock's sycophantic shadow, echoed his leader's sentiment with a forced chuckle, a sound devoid of genuine humor. They had spent the better part of the last hour engaged in what they perceived as sport, deriving perverse enjoyment from the slow, deliberate torment of the old man. The very notion that this withered relic, this old-timer, who was clearly in the way of their enjoyment, could possibly be in control of anything, let alone a game, was utterly preposterous to their self-important minds. Brock, with a flourish designed to highlight his perceived superiority, adjusted the expensive watch gleaming on his wrist, its polished surface catching the dim bar light. "Game? What game, Grandpa? The one where you trip over your own feet trying to find the restroom? Just get out of the way, old man. You're hogging the prime view of the dartboard." His tone was a blend of condescension and thinly veiled aggression, a familiar anthem to anyone who had the misfortune of crossing his path. Vance snickered, nudging Brock with his elbow, basking in the reflected glow of his friend's boorish confidence, oblivious to the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The other patrons, who had until now either skillfully ignored the escalating harassment or offered Silas fleeting glances of sympathy devoid of any real assistance, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few lowered their gazes, pretending to be deeply engrossed in the amber liquid of their drinks or the intricacies of their ongoing conversations. Elara, the quiet barmaid, her usually composed face etched with a silent concern, gripped a damp cloth tightly in her hand behind the bar, her knuckles white. She had witnessed the entire, degrading spectacle unfold, each cruel word, each dismissive gesture, a fresh jab to her own empathetic heart. Her heart ached for the old man, yet she, too, felt the familiar, suffocating pull of intimidation that Brock Sterling effortlessly wielded over the establishment, a silent force that kept most patrons in line. She wondered what the old man meant, what final act of quiet desperation he might be about to perform. She had seen the flicker in his eyes, a depth and intelligence that starkly belied his current presentation. He was not just an ordinary old man, there was something more, something profound. But then, she pondered, what could he possibly do against the likes of Brock Sterling, a man who seemed to embody careless power and casual cruelty? Silas, however, merely offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that contained multitudes, a touch of profound weariness that spoke of a burden carried for too long, a hint of deep disappointment in the human spirit, but overwhelmingly, a chilling undercurrent of absolute control. His gaze, now piercing despite its feigned age, surveyed the faces before him, Brock's smug entitlement, a caricature of youthful arrogance, Vance's bovine amusement, a reflection of his companion's worst traits, the patrons' averted gazes, a silent testament to their collective apathy, and finally, Elara's worried compassion, a solitary flicker of genuine human warmth. He had seen enough. The stage was set. The curtain, he knew with absolute certainty, was about to rise on the final act, an act they would remember long after the last drop of beer had been served and forgotten, an act that would shatter their comfortable perceptions. His performance as the helpless old veteran was, indeed, quite over. To truly comprehend Silas Thorne's enigmatic presence in The Rusty Mug that night, one had to delve into a life far removed from the dusty anonymity he currently embraced. Silas Thorne was not merely an old veteran, he was a titan, a legend whispered about in exclusive circles, a man whose name frequently graced the Forbes lists and resonated in the hallowed halls of philanthropy. He was a billionaire, having built a vast tech empire from the ground up, an empire forged after a decorated, clandestine career in the Special Forces. His wealth was staggering, his influence immeasurable, yet for all his power and prestige, a profound weariness had settled deep within his soul, a disillusionment that gnawed at him more fiercely than any combat wound ever had. The echoes of a life lived at the pinnacle of human achievement, a life filled with power and adoration, paradoxically rang hollow in his ears. He had climbed every mountain, conquered every challenge, only to find a pervasive emptiness at the summit. The genesis of his current masquerade lay in a growing despair over the erosion of fundamental human decency, particularly the respect once afforded to the elderly and to those who had served their nation. He had observed it for years, a gradual, insidious slide into a culture obsessed with youth, superficiality, and immediate gratification. Elders, once repositories of wisdom and revered figures, were now increasingly seen as inconveniences, their slowness mocked, their experiences dismissed as irrelevant. Veterans, once held in high esteem for their sacrifices, were increasingly treated with apathetic indifference, their profound contributions forgotten amidst the clamor for selfish gain and fleeting pleasures. Silas, a man who had faced death head-on, who had stared into the abyss of human cruelty on countless battlefields, and who had built an empire on the bedrock of innovation and relentless effort, found himself paradoxically more wounded by the casual disrespect he witnessed daily than by any overt threat he had ever encountered. It was the quiet, insidious decay of the collective human spirit that truly wounded him. His own life, a tapestry intricately woven with threads of extraordinary achievement, had also become a gilded cage. People approached him not for his character, his wisdom, or his quiet strength, but for his name, his immense fortune, his vast connections. Every handshake felt like a transaction, every complimentary word a thinly veiled request for a favor or an investment. He yearned for genuine human connection, a simple interaction untainted by the shadow of his immense fortune, a moment where he could simply be a person, not a walking bank account or a symbol of power. He wanted to be seen, truly seen, not as Silas Thorne, the billionaire, but as just Silas, an old man, perhaps even a vulnerable one. He wanted to understand if kindness still existed in its purest form, unprompted by expectation or the promise of reward. He wanted to gauge the true character of people when they believed there was absolutely nothing to gain from him, when their actions were driven solely by their inherent nature. The idea for the experiment had germinated slowly, a seed planted in the fertile ground of his profound melancholy, nurtured by years of observation. He recalled his youth, a time when The Rusty Mug had been a vibrant, unpretentious hub, a place where working-class heroes swapped stories and shared camaraderie, where the clinking of glasses was a celebration of shared humanity, not just a prelude to a transaction. It was a place where, he hoped, the raw, unfiltered essence of humanity might still reside, untainted by the superficiality of modern life. He envisioned himself returning, not in the sleek, armored limousine that usually ferried him, but on foot, dressed in clothes that spoke of modest means, a slightly worn overcoat, a hat pulled low, a cane for an added touch of vulnerability. He would cultivate a slight tremor in his hands, a hesitant gait, a disoriented gaze, all designed to project the image of a frail, perhaps slightly senile, old veteran. His hair, usually meticulously groomed and kept in check by his personal stylist, would be allowed to thin and gray naturally, his beard unkempt, adding to the illusion of neglect. His true identity, the carefully guarded Special Forces ID, would be a last resort, a hidden weapon, a key to unlock the true nature of those around him, to shatter their comfortable assumptions. He spent weeks, almost obsessively, perfecting the disguise. It wasn't just about the physical appearance, it was about embodying the role, mastering the mannerisms, the subtle vocal inflections, the precise way an elderly man might falter or hesitate, the almost imperceptible shifts in posture that betrayed age and frailty. He even practiced the slight dishevelment, ensuring it looked authentic rather than contrived, a genuine sign of neglect, not a deliberate costume. He chose the Rusty Mug specifically because it was a place where anonymity was possible, a local haunt where the faces were largely familiar to each other, but not to the new, old man who would appear. He would be an outsider, a blank canvas onto which the true colors of the patrons would be projected. He sought not just to expose the ill-intentioned, the cruel and the indifferent, but also to find the flicker of goodness, the inherent compassion that he still hoped resided within the human heart, a quiet hope that sustained him. He harbored no illusions of changing the world overnight. Such grand ambitions had long ago been replaced by a more nuanced understanding of human nature. But perhaps, just perhaps, he could find a reason to believe in humanity again, a reason to allocate his vast resources to cultivate the very kindness he sought, to nurture the fragile sprouts of decency. And if not, well, then the experiment would still have served its purpose, confirming his bleakest suspicions, allowing him to act with a clear, albeit heavy, conscience. He stepped out that evening, leaving behind the gilded cage of his mansion, shedding the mantle of power, and embracing the humbling vulnerability of a forgotten old man, ready to face the unfiltered judgment of a world he no longer fully recognized, a world he desperately hoped still held some measure of goodness. Silas, now embodying the role of Silas Thorne, the seemingly frail veteran, pushed open the heavy oak door of the Rusty Mug. The air inside was thick, a dense tapestry woven with the scent of stale beer, fried food, and human perspiration, a familiar aroma that tugged at old memories, memories of a time when life seemed simpler, more authentic. He shuffled in, his gaze seemingly unfocused, scanning the crowded room for a quiet corner, a place where he could observe without being observed, a sanctuary from the casual cruelty he anticipated. The bar was alive, a vibrant, pulsating tapestry of conversations, laughter, and the incessant clinking of glasses. He spotted a partially empty booth near the back, a small sanctuary away from the main thoroughfare, tucked almost out of sight. He began to shuffle towards it, his cane tapping softly on the worn floorboards, each step a deliberate, measured effort designed to emphasize his perceived fragility, a performance honed to perfection. He was halfway there, his destination almost within reach, when a loud, booming voice, laden with an almost theatrical arrogance, cut through the ambient noise, effectively halting his slow, laborious progress. "Hey, old man. Where do you think you're going? That's our spot." Silas turned, a slight frown of feigned confusion clouding his face, his eyes carefully calibrated to appear a little lost, a little dim. Standing by the booth, already claiming it with their expansive, aggressive presence, were Brock Sterling and his ever-present companion, Vance. Brock, a man whose arrogance preceded him like a foul odor, pointed a dismissive finger at Silas. He wore an expensive, slightly too tight shirt, his muscles straining against the fabric in an ostentatious display of brute force, and a smirk that suggested the world owed him everything, a birthright of effortless superiority. Vance, equally unappealing in his sycophancy, mirrored Brock's posture, a look of simple-minded aggression hardening his features. "Can't you see we're about to sit there?" Brock continued, his voice rising in volume, deliberately designed to draw attention, drawing a few fleeting glances from nearby patrons, who quickly looked away. "Move it, Grandpa. You're slower than molasses in winter." He punctuated his insult with a sneer, a clear challenge to the old man's very right to exist in the same space. Silas offered a meek apology, his voice soft, almost a whisper, imbued with a tremor of feigned humility. "My apologies, young man. I didn't see you." He feigned a slight wobble, leaning more heavily on his cane, playing the part of the confused, aging individual to perfection. From behind the carefully constructed mask of frailty, he observed Brock's reaction, noting the flash of contempt, the utter lack of empathy, the almost gleeful enjoyment of the old man's discomfort. It was exactly what he expected, a confirmation of his bleakest suspicions. Brock, however, seemed to relish the perceived weakness, taking it as an invitation for further cruelty. "Didn't see us? Are you blind, too? Get out of the way before you fall and hurt yourself. And then blame us, I suppose? The world always blames the young, doesn't it?" He laughed, a harsh, grating sound, devoid of genuine mirth, and Vance joined in, their combined amusement echoing unkindly through the bar, a discordant symphony of callousness. Silas slowly, painstakingly, began to pivot, turning away from the coveted booth. He chose a less desirable spot, a small, uncomfortable stool near a noisy dartboard, where he would be more exposed to the general indifference and casual cruelty of the bar. It was a strategic choice, a place where he would be easily overlooked, a true test of whether any compassion existed. He ordered a simple glass of water, his voice quiet, his movements hesitant, each action reinforcing his chosen persona. The bartender, a burly man named Gus who had seen too many nights and too many customers to be easily surprised, served him without a word, his expression unreadable, though Silas perceived a flicker of impatience in his eyes, a desire for the transaction to be over. The evening wore on, a slow, calculated unfolding of humanity's less flattering traits. Brock and Vance, having secured their desired booth, continued their boisterous revelry, their laughter echoing through the bar, punctuated by the occasional crash of dart against board. Their conversations were a litany of self-aggrandizement, crude jokes, and thinly veiled contempt for anyone they deemed beneath them, which seemed to be most of the world. Silas, from his uncomfortable perch, watched them with a detached, almost scientific curiosity, meticulously noting their patterns of behavior. He observed other patrons, too, the quick glances, the immediate turnaways, the unspoken agreement to not get involved, the pervasive culture of looking the other way. On one occasion, Silas rose slowly to use the restroom, a necessary break from his cramped position. His gait was deliberately slow, a slight shuffle that made him appear even more vulnerable, each step a test of the ambient empathy. As he neared the main aisle, Brock, carrying a fresh round of beers for his table, purposely accelerated his pace, a smirk playing on his lips, bumping hard into Silas. The old man stumbled, his cane clattering against the floor with a hollow sound, a soft gasp escaping his lips, his body swaying precariously. The glasses in Brock's hand clinked precariously, but he managed to steady them with a triumphant grin. "Watch it, you old fool." Brock snarled, his eyes blazing with feigned anger, though Silas knew it was merely an excuse to display his dominance, to further assert his imagined superiority. "Are you trying to make me spill my drink? Do you know how much this cost?" He gestured vaguely at the beers, as if their monetary value somehow justified his aggression. Vance, witnessing the scene, roared with laughter, his face contorted in a grotesque caricature of amusement. "He's trying to get a free drink, Brock. The old beggar. Always looking for a handout." Silas, recovering his balance with a controlled effort, merely looked at them, his eyes wide with a carefully crafted blend of fear and bewilderment. He didn't apologize, didn't retaliate, didn't give them the satisfying rise they craved. He simply picked up his cane, his movements slow and deliberate, and continued his laborious journey to the restroom, a silent, dignified presence in the face of their cruelty. Other patrons, who had momentarily paused their conversations, their gazes briefly drawn to the commotion, quickly resumed them, turning away as if the scene had never occurred, as if by ignoring it, it would simply cease to exist. The collective indifference was almost as chilling as Brock's overt cruelty. It was the silence of complicity, the tacit agreement that it was easier to look away than to intervene, to risk their own comfortable anonymity. However, amidst the sea of apathy, a small island of compassion began to emerge. Elara, the barmaid, had witnessed the repeated indignities inflicted upon Silas. Her heart, burdened by her own quiet struggles, the long hours, the meager pay, the fading dreams of a better life, and the daily grind of a thankless job, nevertheless stirred with a profound sympathy for the old man. She saw the way his eyes, though seemingly vacant, held a deeper sadness, a quiet dignity that Brock's insults could not entirely erase. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands when he gripped his glass of water, the way he flinched almost imperceptibly at Brock's loud exclamations, the silent pain he bore. She observed his quiet resignation, his refusal to be drawn into their petty game. After Silas returned from the restroom, looking even more dejected, his shoulders slumped as if carrying an invisible burden, Alara approached him discreetly. She was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, with weary but kind eyes and a gentle demeanor that belied the toughness required for her job. She carried a fresh glass of water and a small, clean napkin, a small act of quiet service. "Sir," she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper, so as not to draw attention from Brock and Vance, whose boisterous laughter occasionally still pierced the air. "I noticed you were sitting near the dartboard. It's quite noisy there. We have a quieter corner over here, by the window. It's a bit more comfortable, and you can enjoy your drink in peace." She gestured towards a small, unoccupied table tucked away in a less conspicuous part of the bar, near a potted plant that seemed to offer a semblance of peace. It was a spot usually reserved for couples seeking a more intimate setting, a small refuge, but tonight, it was empty. Silas looked at her, truly looked at her, his facade of confusion momentarily faltering, revealing a glimmer of his true self. He saw the genuine concern in her eyes, the quiet empathy that required no grand gestures, no public display, no expectation of reward. It was a small act of kindness, unprompted, unsolicited, and without any expectation of reward, a pure, unadulterated moment of human connection. He gave her a faint, almost imperceptible nod of gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of her genuine spirit. "Thank you, young lady," he managed, his voice still soft, laced with a carefully feigned weakness. "That would be very kind." He slowly, with Alara's subtle, guiding hand gently placed on his arm, made his way to the quieter table. She brought him his water, placing it gently before him, and offered a small, reassuring smile before returning to her duties, her presence a comforting warmth. She didn't hover, didn't make a show of it, didn't draw attention to her act of compassion. It was a simple act of human decency, a quiet defiance against the prevailing current of indifference that dominated the bar. Silas watched her as she moved, observing the fatigue in her posture, the way she patiently dealt with demanding customers, the small kindnesses she extended to others throughout the night, often unappreciated. She was a beacon of light in the dim, smoky expanse of the Rusty Mug, a solitary confirmation of the goodness he had desperately sought, a fragile hope rekindled. He made a mental note, a profound promise to himself, a silent vow that this act would not go unrewarded. As the night progressed, Brock and Vance, fueled by alcohol and their own inflated egos, grew increasingly audacious. They had seen Silas move to the quieter corner, and while they initially ignored him, the mere presence of the old-timer, a symbol of weakness and mortality, continued to irritate them. They saw him as an easy target for their casual sadism, a convenient outlet for their simmering frustrations and inherent cruelty. Their laughter became louder, their voices more grating, their behavior more erratic and aggressive. They tossed darts with careless abandon, occasionally narrowly missing other patrons, their self-important bubble insulating them from any real consequences. At one point, Brock, now quite drunk and feeling invincible, decided he needed to use the restroom again. He passed Silas's table, and instead of walking around, he deliberately veered towards it, his shoulder brushing heavily against the old man, a clear act of provocation. "Still here, Grandpa?" Brock slurred, his words thick with alcohol and malice, his breath heavy with the scent of stale beer. "Thought you'd have shuffled off to the retirement home by now. This is a young man's game, you know, not a place for dusty old relics." Silas merely looked up at him, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, a depth that momentarily unnerved Brock, though he quickly dismissed it as the ramblings of an addled mind. He remained silent, a silent, unwavering presence, refusing to be drawn into the crude game. This infuriated Brock even further. The old man's refusal to react, to cower, to provide the satisfying spectacle Brock craved, was maddening, a defiance of the natural order as Brock perceived it. Brock's face contorted in a sneer, a venomous expression of pure contempt. "What, cat got your tongue, old man? Or are you just deaf now too? I said, get out of my way." With a sudden, unprovoked surge of aggression, his frustration boiling over, Brock reached out and shoved Silas's shoulder, a sharp, unexpected push designed to unbalance the old man and send him sprawling, a final, definitive act of humiliation. The shove was unexpected by the onlookers, but Silas was prepared. His body, trained for decades in swift, precise movements, allowed him to control his fall, making it appear more dramatic, more accidental than it truly was. He swayed dramatically, almost toppling from his stool, a genuine gasp escaping his lips as his carefully placed act intensified, drawing the momentary attention of the bar. As he stumbled, his hand instinctively went to his side, where his worn, slightly bulging wallet was tucked into his inner coat pocket, a habit from his days in clandestine operations. The sudden, exaggerated movement, combined with the precise force of Brock's push, dislodged it. The old, cracked leather wallet, unassuming and seemingly inconsequential, flew from his grasp, arcing through the air before landing with a soft thud on the grimy floor beneath a nearby table, partially obscured by shadows and dust. Brock let out a triumphant bark of laughter, a cruel, mocking sound that resonated through the momentary silence his action had created. "Ha! Butterfingers, old man. Can't even hold on to your paltry savings. Maybe you should stick to knitting, not public places." Vance, ever the eager echo, joined in the laughter, pointing a derisive finger at Silas, his eyes glinting with malicious glee. The two men stood over Silas, basking in their petty victory, completely oblivious to the trap that had just been sprung. Silas, feigning continued disorientation, slowly bent down to retrieve his fallen wallet. His movements were excruciatingly slow, deliberately so, each creak of his foe-aching joints audible in the sudden, tense quiet that had descended upon the bar. As his trembling fingers fumbled for the wallet, a small, laminated card, tucked into a barely visible, inner sleeve, slipped out, unnoticed by Silas's fumbling grip. It slid across the dusty floor, propelled by the slight friction, stopping just inches from Brock's polished, expensive shoe. It lay there, a seemingly insignificant piece of plastic, yet it held the power to shatter their carefully constructed reality. Brock, still basking in his petty victory, his attention momentarily diverted by the old man's apparent clumsiness, glanced down, intending to mock the old man further, perhaps to kick the wallet away. His eyes, though clouded by alcohol, focused on the small, official-looking card lying at his feet. It was a military ID, clearly very old, with a faded photograph of a much younger, intensely focused man, his gaze sharp and unyielding. But it wasn't just any ID. Emblazoned across the top, in bold, unmistakable lettering, were the words, UDAS Army Special Forces. Below, the name, clear despite the faded print, Silas Thorne. And below that, a series of ribbons and commendations, some so rare, so distinguished, they were instantly recognizable to anyone with even a passing knowledge of military history, symbols of unparalleled courage and clandestine service. The laughter died in Brock's throat. His sneer evaporated, replaced by a look of dawning horror, a realization that washed over him like a wave of ice water. Vance, noticing his friend's sudden, alarming paralysis, leaned over, his eyes following Brock's stunned gaze. He, too, saw the card. The name. The insignia. The profound implications. A shiver, cold and sharp, ran through Brock Sterling's entire being, a primal fear seizing his gut. Silas Thorne. The name was not just that of a decorated Special Forces operative, a warrior of immense skill and courage. It was a name that had recently dominated financial news, a name synonymous with innovation, immense wealth, and truly staggering philanthropic ventures. Silas Thorne, the reclusive billionaire who had just donated hundreds of millions to veteran support programs and community upliftment initiatives, whose generosity was as legendary as his business acumen. Silas Thorne, whose face, though usually guarded and rarely seen in public, had appeared on the covers of business magazines, his sharp, intelligent eyes unmistakable even in the faded ID photo, a younger version of the man now standing before them. The man they had just tormented. The silence in The Rusty Mug became absolute, a profound, eerie hush that swallowed every lingering echo of laughter, every whisper of conversation, every clinking glass. It was the kind of silence that precedes a storm, a vacuum where sound had once been, now filled only with the deafening roar of realization. Every eye in the bar, drawn by the sudden, dramatic shift in Brock's demeanor, followed his stunned gaze to the small card on the floor. Patrons, who had pretended not to notice the earlier abuses, who had averted their gazes in discomfort, now stared openly, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and dawning dread, a collective understanding dawning in their eyes. Gus, the burly bartender, his jaw slack in utter astonishment, dropped the glass he was wiping, which shattered on the floor with a sound that seemed ridiculously loud in the profound quiet, a piercing echo of the shattering illusion. Elara, her hands clasped over her mouth, watched with wide, disbelieving eyes, tears beginning to well up. She had known there was something different about him, a quiet strength that belied his appearance, but this was beyond comprehension, a revelation that shook her to her core. Silas, having successfully retrieved his wallet, now slowly, deliberately, reached down and picked up the ID card. His hands were no longer trembling, the feigned tremor had vanished, replaced by the steady, powerful grip of a man in full control. His back straightened, subtly but undeniably. The feigned fragility vanished entirely, replaced by a quiet, formidable presence that seemed to fill the entire room, radiating an aura of unwavering authority and immense power. He held the card up, not for Brock alone, but for the entire bar to see, a silent, irrefutable testament to who he truly was, a shattered mirror of their false perceptions. His eyes, no longer clouded by feigned confusion or weariness, met Brock's, and in their depths, Brock saw not confusion, not fear, not the feigned bewilderment of an old man, but a cold, hard judgment that promised swift and decisive retribution. "As I said, young sirs," Silas repeated, his voice now clear, resonant, and utterly devoid of the gravelly weakness he had adopted. It was the voice of a man accustomed to command, a voice that carried the weight of vast power, unwavering resolve, and absolute certainty. "The game is quite over." The masks had fallen, and the truth, stark and unforgiving, stood revealed in the center of The Rusty Mug, illuminated by the harsh glow of reality. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, for what felt like an eternity, though it was only a few heartbeats. Brock Sterling, his face pale and clammy, his bravado utterly shattered, stumbled backward, almost tripping over his own feet, a pathetic sight. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, only a choked, pathetic gurgle, a sound of pure terror. Vance, his face equally ashen, tried to shrink into himself, as if hoping to become invisible, to melt into the shadows and escape the crushing weight of the revelation. The entire bar was a tableau of stunned disbelief and burgeoning panic, the air thick with unspoken apologies and fear. The old veteran, they had so casually dismissed, so cruelly tormented, was Silas Thorne, a man whose wrath could ruin lives as easily as his generosity could build them, a man whose power was immeasurable. Silas, still holding his Special Forces ID, a symbol of his true identity, surveyed the room with a gaze that missed nothing. His eyes lingered on Brock and Vance, allowing the weight of their folly to press down on them, then swept across the faces of the other patrons who had stood by, silent witnesses to their cruelty, their complicity now starkly illuminated. Finally, his eyes softened slightly as they met Elara's, a rare moment of warmth breaking through his formidable composure. "Brock Sterling," Silas's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel, sharp and precise, each word carrying immense weight. "And Vance. You too exemplify the very decay I sought to witness, the insidious rot that eats away at the fabric of society." He paused, allowing his words to sink in, to twist in their gut, to burn with the sting of undeniable truth. "Your disrespect is not merely for an old man, for an individual you perceived as weak, it is for decency itself. For service to one's nation. For kindness. You judge solely by appearance, by perceived weakness, and you revel in the humiliation of others, finding perverse joy in their discomfort. Brock finally found his voice, a desperate, whimpering sound, raw with fear and desperation. Mr. Thorne. Sir. I had no idea. I swear. We were just joking. A misunderstanding. A terrible, terrible mistake. He tried to step forward, to genuflect, to prostrate himself, anything to appease the Titan before him, but Silas raised a hand, a gesture that stopped him cold, an invisible wall of authority. Joking? Silas's voice was laced with a chilling irony, a cutting disdain. Was it a joke when you purposely bumped into me, hoping I would fall? Was it a joke when you called me a beggar and an old fool, casting aspersions on my dignity? I assure you, your jokes were not amusing. They were a display of your true character. His gaze hardened, becoming a cold, unwavering stare. This establishment, I recall, has a certain standard of conduct. Gus, he addressed the stunned bartender, who jolted at the sound of his name, snapping to attention, I believe these two gentlemen have overstayed their welcome. Permanently. Gus, still reeling from the shock of the revelation, immediately found his resolve, the fear of Silas Thorne's influence far outweighing any lingering intimidation from Brock. Right away, Mr. Thorne. Brock, Vance, you heard the man. Get out. And don't even think about showing your faces here again. Ever. You're lucky that's all he's doing. His tone was firm, unforgiving, imbued with a newfound authority. Brock and Vance, their faces flushed with shame and burgeoning panic, tried to protest, tried to plead, tried to offer pathetic excuses, but their words were cut off by the menacing glares of Gus and even some of the other patrons, who now, emboldened by Silas's powerful presence, looked upon the duo with open disgust. Stripped of their false bravado, their carefully constructed personas of entitled dominance, they were pathetic figures. They were forced to slink out of the bar, their shoulders hunched, their departure met not with sympathy, but with a palpable sense of relief from the collective, a silent cheer. Their social standing, their carefully constructed image of entitled dominance, lay in ruins, shattered beyond repair. Word, Silas knew, would spread like wildfire through their social circles, ensuring their humiliation was complete and lasting, a permanent stain on their reputations. Their careers, dependent on networking and a veneer of respectability, would undoubtedly suffer irreparable damage. They would find doors closing, opportunities vanishing, a direct and fitting consequence of their unbridled arrogance and casual cruelty. Silas turned his attention to Alara, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with awe, disbelief, and a profound sense of wonder. He approached the bar, his movements fluid and purposeful now, the cane forgotten, left leaning against a table. Alara, he said, his voice gentle, a stark contrast to the severity he had just displayed, imbued with a quiet warmth. You, young lady, are a rare beacon of light in a world that often seems determined to extinguish it, a true testament to the enduring power of human kindness. Alara stammered, tears now freely flowing down her cheeks, her voice choked with emotion, Mr. Thorne, I couldn't stand by. It wasn't right. A faint, genuine smile touched Silas's lips, a smile born of true satisfaction. No, you couldn't. And that, Alara, speaks volumes about your character. While others averted their gazes, while others enabled cruelty through their silence, you extended a hand of genuine kindness. You offered a simple glass of water, a comfortable seat, a moment of dignity when it was most denied. You saw beyond the disguise, beyond the perceived weakness, beyond the superficial, and chose compassion, unprompted and without expectation. He reached into his inner pocket, not for his wallet this time, but for a small, elegantly designed business card. It was a private number, a direct line to his personal office, a gateway to a new life. Alara, He began, his eyes unwavering, filled with a deep sincerity. I am establishing a new foundation. A community initiative focused on elder care, veteran support, and fostering genuine human connection within neighborhoods. It will be a substantial undertaking, requiring significant resources and, more importantly, dedicated, compassionate individuals at its core. He placed the card on the bar, its crisp surface a stark contrast to the worn wood. I would like you to be a part of it. Not as a barmaid, but in a leadership capacity. We will ensure you receive all the necessary training, a salary that reflects your true worth, and the resources to make a profound difference in countless lives. Ilara's eyes welled up with fresh tears, her lips trembling. The quiet struggles she endured, the long hours, the meager pay, the fading dreams of escaping her mundane existence, all of it seemed to dissolve in that single, astonishing moment. A chance to work for a man like Silas Thorne, to make a real difference, to escape the crushing weight of her current life, was beyond anything she could have ever dared to dream, a miracle unfolding before her very eyes. Mr. Thorne, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, almost inaudible, I don't know what to say. Silas gently interrupted her, his voice kind but firm. You don't need to say anything, Ilara. Your actions tonight spoke for themselves. Consider this not a reward, but an investment. An investment in the kind of humanity I still believe in, the kind of world I hope to cultivate. He nodded towards the card. Call my office tomorrow morning. They will make all the necessary arrangements. And know this, he added, his voice firm, resolute, your kindness, your true character, has not gone unnoticed. It has been seen, and it will be justly rewarded. He turned and walked out of the Rusty Mug, leaving behind a stunned, silent bar and a young woman whose life had just been irrevocably, wonderfully transformed, her future suddenly bright with boundless possibility. Months later, the story of Silas Thorne's revelation at the Rusty Mug had become a local legend, whispered in hushed tones, a cautionary tale for the arrogant and a glimmer of hope for the kind. It spread far beyond the confines of the bar, morphing into an urban myth, a testament to the unpredictable nature of justice. Brock Sterling and Vance had indeed faded into obscurity, their reputations irrevocably tarnished, their former arrogance replaced by a bitter, resentful anonymity. Their social standing had crumbled, their professional prospects evaporated. No one wanted to associate with the men who had publicly humiliated a revered figure like Silas Thorne. The very circles they once dominated now actively shunned them, a stark and fitting consequence for their public humiliation and ingrained cruelty. They were living embodiments of the proverb that what goes around, truly does come around, their lives a bleak testament to the repercussions of their actions. Silas Thorne, meanwhile, was far from the public eye, having retreated to his serene, private estate, yet his impact resonated profoundly across the community. His new community initiative, named the Thorne Compassion Project, had launched with astonishing speed and immense resources, a direct outflow of his renewed purpose. He had poured hundreds of millions into it, establishing state-of-the-art community centers, providing robust support networks for forgotten veterans, ensuring they received the care and respect they deserved, and creating mentorship programs connecting the wisdom of elders with the boundless energy of youth, fostering intergenerational understanding. It was a tangible manifestation of his renewed faith in humanity, a testament to his belief that even in the darkest corners of indifference, a flicker of light could be found, nurtured, and allowed to blossom into a beacon of hope. At the heart of the Thorne Compassion Project was Ilara. She had embraced her new role with a quiet passion and remarkable aptitude, her inherent empathy proving to be her greatest asset. From a weary barmaid, she had blossomed into an articulate, empathetic, and highly effective director, overseeing various programs and inspiring countless others with her genuine compassion and unwavering dedication. She moved into a beautiful, modest home provided by the foundation, her days now filled with profound purpose and the deep satisfaction of truly helping others, of making a tangible difference in their lives. She often thought of that fateful night at the Rusty Mug, a night that had seemed ordinary, perhaps even bleak, but which had, through a simple, unprompted act of kindness, become the turning point of her entire life, changing its trajectory irrevocably and wonderfully. She was living proof that compassion, even in its smallest, most unassuming forms, could yield unimaginable fruit, transforming not just the lives of others, but one's own. Silas, from his serene, private estate, continued to oversee the foundation, his days now filled with a quiet contentment. He no longer felt the profound disillusionment that had once plagued him, the gnawing emptiness that had led him to embark on his grand experiment. He had found what he sought, not just the depths of human indifference and casual cruelty, but also the enduring power of genuine, unprompted kindness, a powerful antidote to his despair. He had seen character revealed, not in the blinding spotlight of wealth or status, but in the quiet shadows of anonymity and vulnerability, in moments when people believed their actions would go unseen and unrewarded. He understood now, more deeply than ever before, that the truest measure of a person was not how they treated their superiors, or those who could offer them something, but how they treated those from whom they believed they had absolutely nothing to gain. He had tested society, and while he found much to lament, he also found enough goodness to reignite his hope, allowing him to allocate his vast resources not just for change, but for healing, connection, and the quiet cultivation of compassion. Indeed, the world often hides its true colors until challenged, until pushed to reveal its authentic self. It is in the stark contrast of light and shadow, in the crucible of adversity and the quiet moments of unprompted empathy, that the authentic essence of an individual is revealed. For Silas Thorne, the billionaire who became a veteran, the grand experiment had concluded, affirming a timeless truth. True character shines brightest not in the blinding glare of prosperity, but in the often overlooked darkness where kindness, like a single, steadfast star, always finds its profound and deserving reward. If this story of hidden identity, unexpected justice, and profound kindness resonated with you, you'll find a treasure trove of similar tales right here on our channel. We delve into the depths of human nature, exploring moments where deception meets destiny, and true character is brought to light. Don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to witness these extraordinary revelations. Now, we want to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in Silas Thorne's incredible test? Do you think his approach was fair, or too harsh? Have you ever witnessed a similar situation where someone's true colors were revealed? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. We love reading your insights and engaging with our community. Until next time, remember, you never truly know who you're talking to.